To stay faithful to our series, Portrait of a Working Artist, we met Samuel Walker for our next interview. Samuel graduated from Pratt in 2012 and has had a hard time to find employment in his field. He has not made any money from his art, but instead works as an engineer to make ends meet. Despite of the obstacles that lay on a way for African Americans in the art world, Samuel thinks it is a combination of skills, talent, and persistence that decides success. We met Samuel in his East Brooklyn apartment, where he lives with his parents. Samuel divides his work time between his art and the job that pays bills. On the walls hang the array of his work, which consists of mostly African American women and comic characters. And now we present Samuel Walker.
Yeah, so it all started with my grandmother, Nana, as we call her. She was always an artist, and then my mother started drawing, and then I guess my uncle saw that, and then he started drawing.
I guess you are all creative people.
Yeah, more or less, some of us at least.
So you had a starting artist. And we know that many of the artists were poor while they were working, and they became famous and successful posthumously. We also know from many successful artists from their biographies that some of them were born in very wealthy families and they were already very well connected in the art world. So knowing that, how does this affect your perspective as an artist? Where do you see your place?
I think that's a great point. I think that obviously lots of people are successful because of who they know, some form of nepotism, and I definitely see that where I thought that like your skill is supposed to show where you're at. It's like either you're really good at making the art, or you have some great idea behind the art, and that's why people want it. That's why you're successful. That's why you're in demand, and there's more to it than that. It's more to it than just being good at what you're doing. At the end of the day, because if that was it, then I think a lot more people would be successful, and I think part of it is that you have to sort of fight for your place in the art world if you don't know someone.
So how much time do you have to create art? Let's say you have a daytime job, or you have your freelance, or you have your gigs, or whatever you do for a living, right? How much time do you have left after that to create art and something you really like to do? How much time do you have?
Well, a friend said to me once something that I think is really important. He said, time is created. I think a lot of people think of time like, oh, I have this day, and I have to cram all of this stuff into a day, But at the end of the day, if you really want to do something, you can dedicate even 15 minutes to it, even an hour to it. If you drew for an hour a day, you'll make some progress on something. So, you can find the time to do art. I mean, I have a sketchbook, and when I take a train ride, I try to always take it with me.
So you also mentioned that when you went to Pratt, when you studied at Pratt, you felt that the art institutions are more focused on European art. Do you think that is because of the established standards in the art market, what is considered high art, or that's because of the lack of opportunity for African American artists in the art market?
I think it's sort of both. I think there's sort of an interesting phenomenon where, like, I had an art teacher once say to me, black art is in, you should be happy, right? And I think at the end of the day, you know, black art, specifically in the art market, is always sort of looked at in that way, where, you know, it's a fad, it's a thing that comes and goes, you know, and so at the end of the day, there is a larger lack of representation, you know. There's always, you know, there's always a niche market for it, you know. I think there's always a niche market, but it's not the whole market, and it's always, you know, regulated to a certain portion, you know. So I think that, yeah, it's definitely, I think it's both, you know. I think that there's not enough opportunities, you know. I know lots of artists, and on top of that, it's not enough, yeah, just representation, you know. I don't think it's really there, you know.
Your objects your portraits are mostly African American people, right? Or that's the only sign that tells me that it's black art. So, what black art means to you exactly? What is that?
So yeah, that's interesting because, like I said, I think when I was in school, actually, I remember coming in to one class, or it was like a critique. So there's like art on the walls, and I remember seeing some art of black people, right, on the wall. And I remember looking around the room to see who did it, and I was the only person of color in the room. So then I start listening to actual critique, and what I hear them saying, and it's this Caucasian girl who did the art, and she kind of made it sort of like, how do I explain it? I would say that the way she depicted them was not necessarily flattering. And even the teachers were kind of like, you know, have you talked to the people in the community that you're like making art of? Like, have you talked to these people? She's kind of like, no, had no interest in it, you know. And I think even another professor brought it up again, like, you know, how are you communicating with these people? And she's kind of like,
You mean with these people with objects?
with black people in the community she was in. You know, so she was painting the people in this community,
I see.
but from a almost anthropological kind of perspective, like, you know, like National Geographic. Like, she was just exploring a different culture without actually being invested in it, you know. So I think when I say black art, which I mean, I wouldn't even call it black art. What I do, I think, is more specifically Afrocentric and Afrofuturist, you know. And so the way I would describe Afrofuturist art to me is art where it creates an idea and an image about what black people can be in the future, or what Africans can be in the future, and what type of culture we could have, you know. And it's more about investigating sort of like dreams and ideas of what it could be, and how to get there, and using technology specifically. I think most of my art is sort of centered around that. So, you know, I wouldn't say, you know, I think aesthetically, you know, art is very different in general. You know, there's always sort of a canon, but then it's very wide ranging. So, you know, I don't think it's anything specific. I think more it's Afrocentric in its subject matter. And, you know, just to specify, I think my subject matter is very specifically black women.
Most of your work is portraits, the portraits of people with a very rich background, which is sometimes very hard for the artist to create background, because you have to somehow, this background you have to integrate with your object, focusing on the central object, right? So what this background means to you in depicting of your subject matter?
For some of it, I think the ones that you're talking about, the background is actually, the whole story is about, or ideas about the fourth and fifth dimension, right? So it's sort of spiritual ideas, and the figure is obviously in the third dimension, you know, it's in front of you. And then what I'm trying to depict behind them is sort of an opening into the fourth, and then directly behind that, the fifth. But obviously it's sort of an abstract idea of things that none of us have ever seen or at least don't remember. And when I say perspective, I mean the human concept of perspective, of how you see the world specifically from where you're sitting. And I think that most groups, whatever you want to call them, demographics, they don't necessarily see everyone's perspective, and I think that that's because they don't have to. And I think specifically black women often do have to. They have to understand everyone else before they can even understand themselves. And so I think they deserve that representation. They deserve to be made images of where it's a positive, uplifting image.
So why do you said do you focus on African American women? Why is that?
I think that at the end of the day, the way our society has been set up, I would say one of the most disenfranchised groups is specifically black women. And I think ironically that actually it both makes it harder for them, but also makes them stronger people. Makes them more dedicated to certain things. And I just think they need representation. And I think really at the end of the day, if I'm being honest about it, I'm a propagandist. That's what I'm doing with my art. I'm not just making pretty pictures. I'm trying to make a statement about what I think the world should be or could be. And so I think that, black women are not represented enough, or at least only recently has there been any kind of representation. And so I think it's important to paint them, to paint them in that kind of light, to paint them in futuristic settings, because there's so many sci-fi movies, but how many of them star a black woman? How many of them are about like a black woman accomplishing something, as the main role, as the main character? I think to me, I think black women are the future, and I say that in the sense once again because it's about perspective, and I think that's perspective is really mostly what my work is about. I think it's about how you see the world. And I remember I had a critique and I said something like that, like, oh, I think it's about my work is about perspective, and then she's like, oh yeah, 2-point perspective. She's talking about like the drawing concept of perspective. And when I say perspective, I mean the human concept of perspective, of how you see the world specifically from where you're sitting. And I think that most groups, whatever you want to call them, demographics, they don't necessarily see everyone's perspective. And I think that that's because they don't have to, and I think specifically black women often do have to. They have to understand everyone else before they can even understand themselves. And so I think they deserve that representation. They deserve to be made images of where it's a positive, uplifting image. You can use images to have people think one thing or another. So I think I really want to use my images to have people think a certain way.